Before we begin, I just want to say this video took me hours to make. The recording was almost 2 hours long. It took me another 2 hours to edit. So the video is very long. So apologies if you don't really like watching long form videos, but most of my videos are kind of long. This one is just the longest video I've ever made. It's upwards of like 50 minutes, which is kind of crazy. But also hello to everyone in the premiere chat. If you couldn't make the premiere or had to leave and you're kind of rewatching it at some point, then I hope you enjoy this too. But hello to everyone in the premiere chat. And yeah, stick around because as you can tell by how long this episode is, a lot of stuff is going to happen, especially over in the Kurdish region. But yeah, that is enough yapping from me. I hope you enjoyed the video, and special announcement towards the end. Today we're going to be continuing to take a look at a scenario where civilization starts over. We're now on episode number 21, and yeah, this is the big episode. Maybe not the most, actually I don't really know if it's the most important episode ever. It's definitely one of the most planned episodes ever. Like, I have the whole timeline written out. Speaking of timeline, still I have a timeline project where I want to timeline the whole thing. That is going to be happening eventually, but I decided I should just record this first because people want to see this more than they want to see a timeline. The timeline is mainly for me, but you know, I just thought it'd be best if I recorded this first. And that timeline is quite important because it links to a new thing that I'm announcing at the end of this episode, or maybe not at the very end, but like towards the end of the episode. So make sure you watch the whole thing, which when people actually hear the announcement, they will probably be quite excited. But yeah, stick around towards the end because there is a cool announcement, which will involve the use of that said timeline I said that I was going to make. But without further ado, let's jump in to what is going on in this episode. Now, it's been like over a week since I've recorded, more than that, probably like 2 weeks since I've recorded. So I honestly forgot what happened in the last episode. All I really remember is that, hold on, let me get like what's a good color? This kind of white color. That over here, Albania and Bulgaria had another scrap. Izmir fought this country? Or was that the episode before? I don't know. Oh, this was the main point of the video, actually. The Swiss invaded England and made them into kind of like a puppet state. But anyway, what is the first event of this episode? And for this first event, we actually have to go back over here to Bulgaria. The kind of Bulgarian-Albanian war kind of just wrapped up. Now, I don't know if this was the last event of last episode, but we're just going to say that maybe the time was messed up. But essentially, what event is taking place right now is literally either the year after or the same year that the Bulgarian-Albanian war ended and the truce was signed. So maybe like the year 391, the year 392. And we see that these Albanians are already super unhappy with the Bulgarian government. As over here in this major city in the region of Thessaly, we see Albanian rebels rise up. And these people would do anything than being under direct Bulgarian control. And that really shows as these same rebellions appear all over here in the very like major cities of the Bulgarian country. And they quickly consolidate a front line. Bulgaria sends in its military, crushing the people of North Macedonian, or is that kind of West Macedonian, I think. One up over here and pushing them back. However, over here by the Albanian border, suspiciously enough, we see that these rebels will do increasingly well. This fighting will go on for around another 6 months, well into the year 392. Eventually, this war is kind of ending nowhere, as Bulgaria has kind of got to compromise with the Albanians. And the compromise looks something a bit like this, and you might be like, what on earth is going on over here? And what is going on is that Bulgaria has kind of decided that it's going to have to kind of wait to assimilate. As Bulgaria's newly conquered Albanian land is split into 3 kind of separate vassals. And this is kind of the first time we are seeing countries like actually using vassals to kind of, you know, expand their control. Because if this land was kind of ruled by Bulgaria directly, then it would just be constant rebellions. So Bulgaria has decided that it's just going to release 3 vassals, which Bulgaria still has like a lot of control over who's in charge and what goes on. But there is some Albanian representation, and it is enough to make these vassals kind of content. I mean, West Macedonia over here is looking pretty chunky, if you ask me. These countries are kind of resemblant of West Macedonia, Thessaly, which was that pink country, and I think it was also like a blue country down here. This country, if anyone knows what this one was, from like episode 12. This, I don't really know, but their capital was here. So yeah, these 3 vassals have been released from Bulgaria. If you're going to count the Bulgarian Empire, it would still include these as like core territories. But they are officially like on the world stage are puppets. They're not like autonomous regions. They're like actual full-on like vassals, if you will. Okay, I just turned the really light one down a bit because it did look kind of super bright on the map. It still does, but you know, we'll get used to it. But yeah, that is kind of the first event. But anyway, for the next two events, before the main event of the video, we're actually going to be looking at two wars. So I guess, spoiler alert, we're actually going to be looking at three pretty, decent regional wars in a row. And obviously the first country which is going to be doing some invasions is the Swiss. Recently they invaded England, and now they are looking back on the continent for more places to expand. And they kind of evaluate their surroundings. Venice, that's going to be quite hard to invade. Venice is decently strong and it'd be a very bloody war. And it'd kind of be hard to, do a lot of stuff over the Alps. Like, it'd be kind of hard to control, and it really wouldn't be, like, super good. And it'd probably be impossible to take Venice as of right now. They could go into Croatia, but again, that is, like, super far from their capital, and there's really not too much to get out of Croatia. These guys, like, just what's the point? There's no use. And also kind of far, which kind of leaves only one country that is relatively close to the Swiss and also relatively weak, and that is poor old Aquitaine over here. Now, Aquitaine used to be, a decent country. Then when Provence got swallowed up, they lost their northern land up here, and they just kind of been reduced to a rump state. And the Swiss Empress looks at this and is like, this is a free target. As we see that the Swiss launch an invasion into Aquitaine, quickly managing to take this major city. However, Aquitaine kind of has a thing up its sleeve, and that is called an alliance, or more specifically, a personal union. As Aquitaine, Asturias, this kind of Castilian/Leonian country, and Galicia are all in a personal union, and they are all called into this war. However, for now, the Swiss have moved in and they have cut off the capital of Aquitaine. This is oddly reminiscent of Johann right now. I'm getting Johann flashbacks from like 200 years ago. But anyway, Swiss troops will move in and they'll push Aquitaine back to their last major city. But by this point, a combined Galician, Asturiasian, that's not a word, and Leonian maybe, force have arrived, and they've beaten the Swiss in a battle, pushing back, as we see that the Swiss are kind of retreating, and they will even manage to retake this major city. However, when they try and do some kind of sandwich attack like they've done before in the past, again like 200 years ago, they will try and do this, but we see that the Swiss army stands strong, and they actually basically kind of retreat, and the northern force thinks like, oh my god, I'm doing so well, like we're going to sandwich them. But yeah, in the south, we see the Swiss army just completely crash into the Iberian army. And this is a huge loss for these forces, which are all kind of scattered and just kind of go everywhere. And most of them are cut down, especially in the fight for this major city. And they're kind of stopped around here on the Pyrenees Mountains. And then the Swiss army turns back up north and slams right into this northern force. As they begin kind of sieging the major city, the king of Asturias, and thus the king of Leon, Galicia, etc., you already know it, he's going to be like, hey, we need a new army. So he's going to go over to the nobles of Leon and Galicia and be like, hey, raise a new army. And they're going to be like, how about no? We first see in Leon the noble forces rise up and begin rebelling against the Asturias king, quickly consolidating themselves around this major city down here. And they will secure their eastern land and begin fighting kind of loyalist Asturias forces, but those don't really exist. Like Asturias, the Asturias crown has low-key had a personal union for over 100 years on these guys, and they just kind of did nothing with it. Northwestern Iberia being very mountainous kind of meant it was kind of hard for Asturias to really do anything, and the nobles just have so much power in countries, especially like Leon, that they will manage to do this, and eventually they'll just take the capital. Similarly over here, Galician nobles will also rise up down in the south, and this one will go much easier, as we even see that by this point the Asturias king has kind of given up, as nobles have taken control of both Leon and Galicia. And when the king of Asturias does one final launch into Aquitaine, doing incredibly well, we see that unfortunately this king will lose a battle for this major city and die. And with that, Asturias is officially fully invaded and taken over. And this peace treaty is obvious, as we see the Swiss will fully annex Aquitaine. As the Swiss have finally fully avenged Johann and defeated their former nemesis, as now both Aquitaine and Provence have been wiped off the map, and the Swiss expand its empire, and more specifically its influence, further and further towards Iberia. Oh, and also, yeah, this personal union is gone. As we see, a new royal family is elected in these countries by the nobles. We also see over here that Madrid has actually joined the Pink Star Alliance, As these countries work very close together, Madrid kind of sees these two as like trading partners, while none of them really have any proper coastal, like the capitals aren't on the coast and they don't have any super big cities. Obviously, like there are some smaller cities on the coast, so, you know, Madrid would love to kind of export some goods. But for the next war, we're actually not going to be going far, as we actually have to go over to the Cadiz country, as the Cadiz country has been going through a bit of a rough patch. They are the strongest country in Iberia, but recently they've been kind of getting behind, and there's been a lot of like turmoil within the country. And also, you know, they have terrible borders up here, because why does it look like that? There we go, I fixed it. But one country to the south is looking at this and is like, this is a great opportunity. Also, what country is this? Is this the Berbers? Guys, the Berbers still exist on this one tiny island right here, everyone. Oh, and they exist right here. Well, first, Tlemcen is going to launch an invasion into the old Berberland and finally take back these islands. A feat celebrated by many, and this feat gives them the confidence to launch an invasion into Cadiz. Tlemcen troops launch an invasion quickly surrounding the Granada city over here, or the city of Granada. And they don't take it. You know, I coloured this in slightly wrong. But nonetheless, we see that the forces of North Africa are continually like showing that they are way stronger than Iberia. Iberia, not the most advanced armies, if I'm being honest, in the world. Probably one of the poorest regions in the world. If not the poorest, other than like over here with Hungary. We see that in a matter of a month, Cadiz has been completely kicked out of North Africa over here. As we see that the army of Tlemcen continues to rampage in, as they actually managed to kill the king of Cadiz around this land here, as it's looking like the Cadiz country might completely fall over to Tlemcen. However, it's at this point that we actually see that Portugal will launch an invasion into the Cadiz country, but not a hostile invasion, actually a friendly one. As we see that the Cadiz country offers to give up this strip of land north of this river that Portugal has been, like, always wanted, in return for their help, and Portugal sends their help in, and they actually do pretty well. Portugal's army is pretty reformed, and when they combine with Cadiz, they push back. But anyway, we see that they will manage to push back. However, eventually over here, we see that Granada will fall. And this kind of leads to Tlemcen relaunching their invasion. And eventually, we see that Tlemcen and Cadiz are going to go ahead and come to a peace treaty where Cadiz will lose some land, but not all. And there we go, this is what the peace treaty looks like. We see that the Cadiz country has gained this piece of land and kind of this piece of land. Not the Cadiz country, whatever it's called. I'm getting my names mixed up. The flipping Tlemcen, there we go. I'll go Tlemcen, they kind of gain that land. And while we see over here that Portugal kind of gained this strip that they wanted, which is, you know, good for Portugal, I guess. Not really good for the Cadiz country, who has probably been knocked off their spot. The strongest country is actually probably Madrid by now. Like, if we look at the power rankings, we see that Madrid was previously the second strongest, and they're probably the strongest now. Asturias has probably fallen off. These two, I don't really know. But I think Madrid is probably the only slightly alright Iberian country by now. But yeah, Iberia, not really the strongest region. But anyway, ladies and gentlemen, let's go ahead and get into the main event. As we see over in the year 397, that the Kurdish emperor will go ahead and die. And why on earth is there a random pixel here? Well, whoever was trying to rebel on this wrong random pixel, they've been crushed after like 2,000 years. Not 2,000, probably more like 400 or whatever. But yeah, the Kurdish emperor has gone ahead and died. And this leads the Kurdish empire into a very bad state of instability, as there wasn't really a solid succession. The Kurdish emperor didn't have any sons. He had two brothers. Problem is, they're twins, and nobody really knows who was born first. I mean, in reality, they probably do know who's older, but like, they're both probably going to pretend like, oh, I'm older, I should inherit. And the kind of, you know, guy that was in charge before is like, I don't care. That's not going to be my problem when they die. But that is going to be the Kurdish Empire's problem. As you see that the older twin brother, I know I just said they didn't know who's older, but we know who's older. The older twin brother is actually going to be the one in charge. Funny enough, he actually should be the one in charge. But you know, some people don't think that. And a lot of regions around the kind of empire do not agree with this. As you see down here, over in the city of Babylon, the beginning of the second Mesopotamian revolution, as you see that the region of Mesopotamia around the Tigris and Euphrates River will rebel as you clearly see that almost all of the main Mesopotamian region comes under control of the Mesopotamian Revolution. However, if you just celebrated and thought, yeah, Mesopotamia is going to be independent, you were kind of wrong. This is actually led by the younger brother of the twins. And he honestly doesn't care about the Mesopotamians. He just, wants to kind of become in charge, basically. And somehow, as soon as I get to the most important bit, my nose is, fully blocked. And now it really hurts to talk, and I sound really, ill. But nonetheless, the younger twin brother is going to enjoy a lot of success down here, taking over all of this region. And now most people are looking at this like, hey, the Kurds are going to deal with this. It's just a Kurdish civil war. They're not particularly weak. It's still the Kurdish. They're still the second strongest country in the world, or at least the last time we looked at power rankings, which was 15 years ago, they were. But one country, or more particularly, one man is going to look at this and see grave opportunity. And that is over here in Pavlos. Now, in the last episode, we saw Pavlos absolutely batter. It was actually Venice, actually. Maybe not this country. No, I think it was actually Venice they ended up battering. Also, this 1 pixel has never been claimed before. There we go. But yeah, we saw that Pavlos absolutely battered everyone. And we're going to see that Pavlos is going to see this as an opportunity to get revenge for the Greeks. The Anatolian Republic was a country that existed over here a few episodes ago, that kind of consisted of two main sides: the Greek side, which was like this or whatever, and then the Anatolian side, which was like this. But obviously the Greek side is now under the Kurds, and Izmir / Pavlos looks at this and is like, we're going to get revenge for the Greeks, and we're going to kind of unite the Greeks, especially the ones over in Anatolia, and we're basically just going to bring glory to the Greeks. So Pavlos launches his invasion into the Kurds. And now, there's a bit of an interesting thing you should understand about Pavlos and his army. And for that, we're going to go over to a blank canvas, and I'm actually going to kind of draw out the army. Now, I actually am not an army expert, so this could just be not what an army looks like. But anyway, we kind of see that the main body of the army is this kind of chunky section over here. There we go, symboled by main. Pavlos will obviously be the main leader. Well, I say obviously, but Pavlos is kind of in charge of this main section. He's obviously in charge of the whole army, but this is kind of speciality. In the back, we actually see an elite force. And actually, I'll be back because I'm going to go get a bunch of water because my nose is stuffed up and I don't think I can record the rest of the video like this. So I'll be back. Okay, I'm back from getting a drink. I don't feel any better, but we continue. The leader of the elite infantry is going to be a guy called Ilus. Now, this font is kind of bad because this kind of looked like triple L. So I'm just going to put it like this. It's not capitalized. It annoys me, but it just kind of shows the difference. And then kind of the final two main regiments, which, like I just said, I don't know if this is what an army would ever look like, but this is what we're going with, is going to go ahead and be two main cavalry regiments. The left flank is led over here by Zeno, who was actually the second in charge of the army. While over here, we see that the second cavalry regiment is actually led over here by Leo, who is actually Pavlos' brother. However, Leo isn't really in charge. It kind of goes first in charge, second in charge, third in charge. Then Leo was just kind of in charge of this cavalry unit. But yeah, this is kind of what the army looks like. These are the four main people, which will be referenced this episode and actually in the next few, or at least the next one. But yeah, that's kind of a bit of an understanding about how the army looks like and also how organized it is. Obviously, it's going to be more organized than this. This is a very, terrible diagram to show how organized an army is. If your army is organized like this, then it's not going to go well. But nonetheless, we see that Pavlos over here has launched an invasion into this region. We see over here in March of 1399 that Pavlos will fight a great battle here with kind of the second army of the Kurdish. The Kurdish kind of have three main armies. The third army is kind of their main Egyptian army down here. The second army is the Anatolian one, and obviously their first army is kind of for the main kind of region. But nonetheless, when they fight the Kurdish second army, we see that Pavlos will use his superior tactics and his generals to pull out a pretty astonishing win, taking the city, killing the leader of the Kurdish second army, and also leading to a lot of people mutinying. Because, fun fact, when you make an army mainly built of Greek people, and they're being invaded by a Greek person who wants to liberate all Greeks, you're probably not going to have that many people supporting you. And we actually see that out of most of the casualties lost by the Kurds, over 50% of them were due to actually the Greeks not only mutinying, but also switching sides, as we see that Pavlos will actually gain a lot of troops from his army, and a lot of them will actually cavalrymen, as the Greeks are pretty good horse riders, and obviously, you're going to give it to your best horse riders as the people riding the horses and the cavalrymen. Slash knights. I mean, I call them cavalry, I don't really know. That might be like a more medieval term, but it's horses, basically. So when they get all this new cavalry, they're just going to use this to their advantage. As you see, they will win yet another battle against the remnants of the Kurdish second army, almost completely destroying them and managing to take this major city. Meanwhile, up over in the north, we see that Pavlos continues his invasion up here. However, the Kurdish emperor is still not really that concerned. His main threat is down here, with the kind of rival guy who has managed to consolidate his front to look something like this. Also around the city of Tyre, another supporter of the younger brother has kind of emerged down here, kind of forming out this region, and they kind of aim to split the Kurdish Empire in two. However, down here from the south, we see a guy known as Saladin II, who is son of Saladin I, who, if you didn't know, Saladin I is the kind of famous Egyptian general who basically just saved the Kurdish Empire in the Kurdish coalition. He's going to come up here and he is going to be just like his father and use the Egyptian Third Army to crush this rebel group, killing everyone in control, taking back this land. And then he's going to go over here and decisively crush the Mesopotamians for this kind of city over here. And this kind of alleviates the pressure of the main older Kurdish brother. And it's kind of like, hey, you know what? I, Saladin II, will deal with the Mesopotamians. You go over here and deal with Izmir. Izmir is starting to look more and more like a threat, as they have kind of raided down here into this major city, taking it. While over here, we see that a small kind of army of Greek people, mainly from around this city, they've kind of risen up. And they've actually managed to storm this city over here. Now, this army is not really a proper army. Like, if this army fought any, like, proper army, then they get clapped. But because, nobody really wants to fight them, because, the Kurds just hate the Turks and the Greeks, we see that this small army is having fun around here until eventually they fight a pretty decently sized Kurdish army down here, and they just get absolutely battered. However, don't worry, because we see up over here that Pavlos is going to come down and he's going to go ahead and batter this army, like so. However, at this point, we see that Pavlos will go ahead and have to fight his hardest challenge yet for this major city, as a pretty big contingent of the Kurdish force, the Kurdish First Army is here. Not all of them, including the Emperor, who is still in his city, kind of not fearing anyone. And this battle will prove something about the Greeks and Pavlos, and that is that their morale is so unbelievably higher than everyone else, and the Greeks are so unbelievably full of themselves and self-confident in their abilities that they will absolutely crush the Kurdish army. Like, Pavlos' army was already very strong. I mean, they beat the Kurds, but winning this battle has boosted their morale so high that they basically just start raiding everything. It's like the time of your life, really, if you're part of Pavlos' army right now. They will absolutely just crush this city. It probably slaughter most of the people. This city probably doesn't have enough people to be represented as a major city, but I'm going to keep it as one because I can't be asked to do all that. That's a bit too much for me. But we see that Pavlos is absolutely sweeping through this land. While over here, these two regions have submitted over to Pavlos and Izmir. And it's looking like the threat isn't actually Mesopotamia, as we see that Saladin has entered over here and has actually managed to take the city of Babylon. The actual threat over here is Izmir. We see in the battle for this major city that Saladin will decisively defeat and also kill the kind of younger brother of the Kurdish emperor, ending this rebellion group. However, over here, we see that the Kurdish emperor has actually fled. Like, the first army has been basically destroyed. It's mainly just the main Egyptian army that's kind of left. As we see, the Izmirian forces arrive outside the capital city, which, by the way, this is actually called Batman. That's actually the IRL city here, so, yeah, Batman. As they kind of begin sieging the city, however, eventually they're like, yeah, there's not really a point of sieging the city, so we're just going to go ahead and go up here. They leave kind of like a few thousand or maybe like a few hundred men to siege the city, but like, this city ain't falling anytime soon. It's probably going to take like 5 years if we're being for real. However, it's at this point up over here that Georgia's going to be like, you know what, the Kurds did kind of set us up, so we're, going to do some nice friendly invasions. We're obviously trying to, preserve the Kurds. We're definitely not trying to take land for ourselves, as Georgia will go ahead and launch an invasion into the Kurds. Meanwhile, over here, Armenia will also kind of get in on the action, and they will go ahead and take this major city. We see that Pavlos' younger brother, Leo, is sent up over into this northern region to kind of subdue a lot of these cities up here, which are actually kind of loyal to the Kurds for some reason, which they would do incredibly well in. Leo will also fight a battle over here with the Georgian army in which they will win, as Georgia is kind of told, hey, leave this land. So they will go ahead and do that, as Georgia is kind of forced to embarrassingly, retreat. Leo does not go into Georgia because that's not the main enemy. We also see that Leo will go ahead and meet with the king of Armenia, or I guess kind of the Tsar of Armenia, and be like, you know what, we can kind of work together, but, make sure you kind of fear us and establish that we are going to be the true successors to the Kurds, not you, so you better not take that much land. And Armenia will kind of agree to this. They don't want too much land. They kind of wanted all of their lost land back, but they're happy, that as long as they get this major city here, then they'll be more than happy. But anyway, Leo is shown to be very successful, as kind of all of this region has now fallen over to Izmirian forces. Obviously, not all of this is occupied. Most of this is not occupied at all, because obviously Izmir doesn't have the population to do that, but these people have kind of sworn loyalty. We then see that Leo will arrive back down here, as Leo and Ilus kind of form one army, while over here we see that Zeno and Pavlos kind of form another army. Leo and Ilus's army will go ahead and push down this river, which I don't know which is the Tigris or which is the Euphrates, but they will do incredibly well pushing down. While over here we see that Pavlos will fight yet another battle for the city in which they will win. And at this point the Kurdish army has been basically completely routed. And you might be like, hold on, this doesn't make any sense. Izmir is so small, the Kurdish are so big. But bows aside, armies, ladies and gentlemen, there's going to be hate. I've already kind of accepted that. Hopefully I can kind of show, I'm trying to show some sort of realism to this, but obviously I understand that, you would never really imagine this would ever happen, but it is. But the main thing is that the Kurdish army was split into three the whole time, and they've never been really unified, because it's why would I fight for the Kurdish Empire when I don't like the Kurds? The only real army that kind of remains is the Kurdish Third Army, but they are kind of a bit run down and they don't really have that many supplies. And we actually see that Saladin II is, he's quite smart. He knows that if he fights them alone, he can't beat the Kurds. So he's trying to raise a new army, mainly around here in kind of the Lebanon and Egyptian region, which is kind of where the Kurdish emperor is kind of escaping to. He's in here right now, but he's soon going to go here. And the reason he's going to go here is because Pavlos has managed to take the city. The emperor manages to just get out and has fled over here to, did I just say Lebanon? I meant Jerusalem. Or I guess kind of this version's world of Jerusalem. I don't really know. But nonetheless, these two armies will kind of meet and launch a dual attack on the city of Babylon, in which the siege will last around 6 months, but eventually they will go ahead and take it. And eventually, and after they have taken Babylon, Pavlos is not an idiot. He knows that the Kurdish are raising up a new army. And, while Izmir has taken all this land, the Kurdish still probably have, half of their population. Maybe more than half, because Egypt is a pretty big portion of the empire. It's not as much as in real life, probably, where Egypt would probably be more than half of the population. If we're being real in this country. It's kind of not like that, but they do probably have, 60% of their population still under their control. Which means that the Kurds, if they play their cards right, could still raise a very large army and crush Pavlos, especially if caught off guard. So Pavlos is like, hey, if we invade this land, we're probably giving too much time over to these guys. So Pavlos will go over to Ilus and be like, hey, Ilus, you're going to be the governor of this region. Can you just kind of finish off these guys? And Ilus will be like, yeah, but I'm going to go ahead and begin finishing off the Mesopotamian region. However, when he tries to take this city, he will be kind of caught up. So, Ilus is doing a pretty good job at taking Mesopotamia, while the main forces have kind of pushed over here, and now look something a bit like this. Obviously, they don't actually occupy most of this desert, but, these guys are kind of coming over here. This is Pavlos, Leo, and Zeno are kind of over here. We see that there's only really a few main holdouts still left, and, it's literally just these three regions over here, which are still under Kurdish control. Going back over to Leo, we have seen that he's kind of made some progress. He's actually abandoned this city over here, and these guys have kind of got control around this kind of one river basin. They've kind of turned it into a bit of an island, which is kind of funny. So this is kind of the really only loyalist group left of the Kurds down here in Mesopotamia. The rest of it has effectively fallen over to Leo, except this kind of major city in the very south. But yeah, Leo is working on over this. However, obviously his army isn't super big because it's just him. And did I say Leo? I did not mean Leo. I meant Ilus this whole time. Leo is over here in the main army. However, bad news, as we see that after the Battle of Tyre takes place, which was a pretty big battle between the Kurdish, like the kind of Kurdish history, the Kurdish, and the kind of, I think actually Berbers down here, for being for real. I think it was actually the Berbers. We see that news has just been received that there is a new threat back home, as Venice has launched an invasion into Izmir. Venetian troops arrive all across the coastline, as Venice has been waiting for this invasion, and they are now here. The Venetian forces in the north consolidate a front line, and with the countryside of Izmir basically being kind of really undefended, which that's probably not a great idea, we see the Venetian troops will kind of just waltz in. The Greeks put up fierce resistance, which kind of leads to a lot of this land actually managing to, you know, kind of stay under Izmir control. If there wasn't much resistance, Izmir would probably completely fall over to Venice. We quickly see that Zeno is sent all the way back, who's kind of like Pavlos' second in command. He's sent back over here, in which to kind of get over to Venice, he will actually have to march his army through Venice. And Zeno's skill is much like Pavlos. He is probably Pavlos' equal, or at least that's how Pavlos describes him. They're kind of like best friends. Best friends or lovers, question mark. But anyway, we see that Zeno is forced to go back over here to Venice, where eventually he'll re-enter Izmir. However, by this point, the city of Izmir is facing a dual attack by Venetian forces and is currently under siege. And yeah, it's not looking too good for Izmir back in the homeland. However, that is not the main focus. And also, I just realized I called this Tyre. I didn't mean to call this Tyre. Tyre is down here. This is actually Lebanon. Well, not Lebanon, but this is kind of in the modern country of Lebanon, I think. Yeah, so we're just going to call this like the Battle of Lebanon or whatever. Not the Battle of Tyre, my bad. But nonetheless, we see that the kind of main Izmirian army has managed to take Damascus. And eventually, once they take Tyre down here for real, we see that Pavlos, his news that, you know, the Venetian war over here is not going too well. And with Ilus over here, kind of, you know, stuck down here dealing with this, and Zeno over here stuck dealing with this, it is kind of just Pavlos and his brother Leo, which is great, but, you know, he's missing kind of half of his, you know, generals, or kind of like half of the brains of the army. And one person sees this, and that is actually Saladin, who goes over to the Kurdish emperor, who goes over to the Kurdish emperor and is like, this is the time to strike. There is no other point to strike. This is the point where Pavlos is at his weakest, and we have to strike. However, the Kurdish emperor will actually hold off. He kind of hopes that more reinforcements will arrive from kind of like the southern Egyptian regions down here to kind of back up his army. Reinforcements do arrive, but not for the Kurdish. As we see up over here, the reinforcements kind of from Leo's army, they kind of pulled out some troops from Leo, which actually has kind of led to Leo losing actually a bit of ground over here. And I just said Leo again, I meant Ilus. Ilus is the one in Mesopotamia. Leo is the one with his brother Pavlos in Jerusalem. But yeah, reinforcements have arrived for Pavlos' army, and now Saladin's like, hold on, if they've got reinforcements, we actually shouldn't fight this. But the Emperor's like, I'm fighting it now. Like, you just said fight it like 3 weeks ago. I'm fighting it now. As you see that Pavlos and the Kurdish Emperor will come face to face. In the battle known as the Battle of Jerusalem, one of the deadliest battles in history, as we see that almost the entirety of the Izmirian and Kurdish armies are destroyed. However, at the end of the day, one country has to come out on top. And unfortunately for any Kurdish supporters, Pavlos wins the day. As we see that in the battle, the Kurdish emperor is killed. Saladin II kind of takes control of any remaining forces. As you see, Saladin creates a brand new Kurdish successor state over here in Egypt, kind of using this short, narrow line connecting the two continents as kind of the border. As we see, most of the rest of this region will actually surrender over to Izmir, with this tiny region over here for some reason being loyal to the Kurds. But to be fair, now the Kurdish colour is just kind of an absolute mess, because the Kurdish emperor technically is Saladin over here. He's kind of inherited the throne because there's nobody else to inherit it. But he's kind of formed his own state over here based in Cairo. Kind of like the Cairoan state, or no, I don't know what it was. I guess kind of the Cairene. That's probably the word, the Cairene kind of state over here. So any of these like purple pockets are just kind of like local rulers now fighting for an emperor that doesn't even want to fight for his own country, nor really care about the Kurdish mainland. So this kind of leads to a lot of these pockets falling, like over here where this pocket will surrender, and over here. While over here, Ilis has received reinforcements and has decisively crushed the leader over here, and has managed to take this land. However, we actually see that the final kind of main Kurdish forces, the remnants, have actually grouped up, and they've actually managed to retake the city of Babylon, rerouting Ilis for the city over here. As Ilis is actually kind of crying for help over here, as he's actually managed to be pushed back all the way over here. As we actually see over in the Mesopotamian region, the creation of a brand new state, or I guess kind of the declaration of a brand new state, as the guy that led this great counter attack is like, hey, we saw over here that Saladin kind of did it himself, so we're actually going to go ahead and create our own successor state of the Kurdish called, like, I don't know, the Mesopotamian Empire? I don't really know if that's the right word. Like, the Mesopotamian state, essentially, or kingdom, whatever. However, up in the north, an old enemy of the Kurdish is going to be invading, and that is going to be the Persians over here, as Persian raiders basically just pour into this land, taking this city. However, these Persian raiders will actually go a bit far, as they kind of are like, hey, we don't want to take the capital, so they will actually go to the capital. However, on their way, they will go ahead and raid this major city over here, killing a lot of people. And one of the people they have killed is actually Pavlos' sister, who was kind of on the way to the Kurdish capital, actually. Also, this should be like this. The Persians actually haven't got to this, because there's like an army here, so there would actually be a super big battle. But anyway, we saw that the sister of Pavlos was kind of in this city, ready to go to the Kurdish capital to essentially sign peace with some Saladin representatives. But yeah, she is killed, so 1, the peace doesn't happen, and 2, you just killed my sister, so I'm coming for you. We see that Pavlos will go ahead and send his brother down here to help with Mesopotamia. He also sends some troops up over here to help with Zeno over here. But speaking of Zeno, he has managed to decisively crush the Venetian forces, delivering a crushing blow, which has kind of led to a lot of the Venetian front line being defeated, as the Venetian northern front is split up into 2. As Venice really only has control in a lot of these kind of coastal cities. However, over here, Venice has managed to kind of push back Izmir, kind of basically just removing all their land they had previously occupied in the country. But anyway, now that Pavlos is just on his own, he's not going to have... Oh, what the hell just happened? Anyway, what I was saying is he's not going to have any mercy, as when he, fights these Persian people, he just massacres every single one of them, or just enslaves the entire army. So, yeah, that's great if you're Persia, or not really, as Pavlos, he's just destroying everyone. The Persian armies really aren't the best, and when you're faced with a mastermind like Pavlos, who also has probably the strongest army, well, definitely the strongest mobilized army in the world. And by this point, Pavlos' army has grown massively. He has gotten way more people from all across the empire. This has been happening like a while. I should have said this ages ago, but like Pavlos' army is nowhere near the size it started with. All throughout the years, it has been kind of gaining strength. But now, in the year 403, we see Pavlos will take the capital of Persia. And following this, Pavlos will go on some conquests in the north, subjugating the northern regions. And in the year 404, when Pavlos takes this city, we see that Persia will officially surrender over to Pavlos' rule. And when the people surrender over and it's like, hey, we can keep all our land, Pavlos will just go, hey, you're all executed. And Pavlos will execute almost all the nobles in the Kurdish, and will be like, here's a bunch of Greek ones. So, a good way to wipe out the entire Persian royal family, I guess. Maybe in Persia this is known as, like, Bloody Monday. What a name, I guess, I don't know. Or maybe, like, the Pavlosian Massacre or something. I don't know, Pavlosian Massacre, maybe. But anyway, we see that Pavlos has been absolutely ruthless. However, good news down here, because his brother Leo and Ilis down here have managed to, do some dual invasions down here. And eventually they re-met over here in Babylon and took the city, killing the kind of leader of this new Mesopotamian country and really subduing it. We see down here that Saladin has kind of used this opportunity to actually launch an invasion up over here, managing to retake the city of Jerusalem. We see that Leo and Pavlos begin sieging the Kurdish capital, while a lot of forces are sent over here with Ilus all the way to Zeno. And when these forces arrive, it kind of spells defeat for Venice, who by this point has actually been holding out quite well. Zeno is very good at, like, he's a great general and stuff, but Venice just had the kind of upper hand in resources, so they managed to hold out for so long. But unfortunately, we see that Venetian forces are now being kicked off, and actually this is kind of wrong. They would never be able to take back that island. But on any of this mainland, we see that Izmirian forces have basically managed to completely repel Venice. And we see that when Ilus arrives, he launches a complete invasion of Venice, or I guess kind of Venetian Anatolia. Now, this probably has been happening, well, this definitely has been happening over like a few years. Like I say, Zeno probably first left at 402, and it is now like the year 406, so it's been around 4 years, but he's finally managed to defeat Venice. Oh my god, I just did that again. And kick them off of Anatolia. But finally, in November 406, the Kurdish capital will finally cave in. After 6 years of siege, Batman has finally fallen. And with that, we see that Pavlos and his top generals will go ahead and meet in the city of Tyre. And by meet, I mean they will actually be meeting with Saladin II over here to kind of devise a peace treaty. And yeah, we can go ahead and look at this peace treaty, which will entitle The Complete Collapse of the Kurdish Empire and the Rise of a Brand New Empire, or maybe even two. And there we go, this is what the peace treaty of Tyre looks like. Now, you might be looking at this like, what the hell? So, let me explain it. I mean, there's not really much to explain. Essentially, the whole Kurdish Empire was either split between Armenia and this tiny, like, I don't have the right colour. This tiny chunk over here all went over to Armenia. I say tiny, that's actually pretty big, but, you know, Izmir basically got everything. Maybe like, what the hell are these two new states? Well, essentially, this is kind of the princedom of Tyre over here. Or, not the princedom of Tyre, I said it again. The princedom of Lebanon, which is led by Pavlos' brother, aka Leo. While over here, this is the princedom of Mesopotamia, led by Ilus. And now you might be like, where's Zeno? Where's his cool state? Like, surely Zeno should get, like, some state over here in Persia to make these borders look better. And you might be right, but Zeno is like, hey, I don't really want that much. However, Pavlos is a very generous guy. I mean, you know, you don't just give out, like, some of the most prosperous kind of regions in your empire to, like, I mean, these are still both vassals, obviously, of Izmir. But you don't normally give that out unless you're super nice and generous. So yeah, Pavlos is generous. However, we do see that Pavlos does go over to Zeno and is like, hey, you can have the palace in Batman, the Kurdish capital. And Zeno is like, hey, I can't take this because obviously you're the emperor and, like, I'm bowing down to you. But Zeno eventually is like, fine, I'll become the governor of Batman. So he's like the governor of Batman, and the kind of core Kurdish region is kind of the region of Batman. Which, if we kind of look at the core Kurdish region in terms of this, it's something like this probably. Actually, I can say this is probably the core Kurdish region, kind of actually including this, like that's the core Kurdish region. But in terms of this part, this is kind of what he governs as the governor of Batman. That's just such a funny name. What kind of government title are you? I'm the governor of Batman. But anyway, I do agree these borders kind of look a bit wacky with, like, I mean, obviously if I did that, they'd probably look decently better. But, like, that's just kind of what happens. You can view it as one kind of unified state, but these regions are princedoms, which are essentially just vassals. One led by his brother in Lebanon, not Tyre, and the other led by Ilus, who kind of commanded the elite infantry over in Mesopotamia. This is great and all, and for the years 407 and 408, Izmir kind of builds up its stability. Obviously, it's got a lot to assimilate because, you know, they just conquered this land. Maybe there's a few rebellions, few uprisings, but for the most part, the governing system of Pavlos is pretty good. It's actually Zeno who is in charge of most of the governing. That's also another role he has, and he's actually a very good governor. Pavlos is more of the generally brains kind of guy. I mean, Zeno's also a good general. But then Zeno is kind of like the admin kind of governing, like really good at governing. So they're kind of a bit of a duo, you know, best friends for life. But yeah, this piece is going to be ended in the year 409, as we see the Persian raiders have launched a full-on invasion into the Kurds. And you might be like, what the hell is going on? Like, why is this brown country invading? And it's not this brown country, as we actually see that all of these countries have united in their invasion. Now, they haven't just, like, united. Like, this isn't just a brand new country. But for the sake of this, I'm just going to colour it in one, because I don't want to make, like, 17,000 different colours. Because, spoiler alert, these countries are going to get invaded. So, yeah, we see that Persia has launches a raid. Persia? What? I don't even know what I'm saying. The Persian countries have launched a raid into... What? The Persian countries have launched... We see up over here, the Persian countries have launched a raid into North Persia, sieging this city, managing to actually take this city, which I think is modern-day Tehran. While up over here, we see that most of North Persia has fallen over to these Persian raiders, who continue their advance. However, we see down here that Ilis has actually launched an invasion into this region, taking this major city. Using his brand new Mesopotamian army, he is able to do pretty well, as he kind of focuses on the southern region, which obviously this is all mountainous, so this will probably take like a few years, or I guess maybe 1 or 2 years. Up over here, Pavlos has gathered in his new army, and he decisively crushes the Persians over here, as at this point, the Persians realise that they are fighting probably the world's strongest military, and, you know, they really shouldn't have. And eventually, after around 2 years, I am slightly rushing this because the recording is an hour and a half long, but eventually we see that the Persians are heavily pushed back, and eventually they lose their full kind of foothold over here. And in the year 411, around 2 years after the Persians have kind of, you know, invaded, we see that Pavlos walks into Persian land and begins conquering it. Like I said, this is not how it would go. Like, they do what they did originally and kind of conquer city by city. But, you know, for like time's sake, we're just going to say that, you know, somehow they just did it like a modern army. But eventually we see that all of Persia has been taken. But all of Persia kind of hasn't been taken, as a lot of Persians have actually fled. As these fleeing Persians will mainly be down here in the south, and they will continue fleeing into uncharted territory. Pavlos will kind of have no choice but to kind of chase them, as they chase them into brand new land that they haven't explored, which leads to, I guess, kind of exploration of brand new land down here. The Persians will actually explore a lot of land, as these Persians are burning the major like settlements and resource lines, which kind of forces the Izmirians / whatever his name is again, and Pavlos to kind of rethink their strategy. As because obviously there's people living here, so they're kind of facing constant raids along this line here. So they have to keep, you know, going back and forth, which kind of gives the Persians a head start. But eventually Pavlos does continue to kind of hunt down these Persians, until eventually we see the Persians reach this kind of land down here, this kind of more flatter terrain. And when Pavlos catches up to this region, they do not see Persian soldiers, or at least they're not alive Persian soldiers, as there's just kind of a field of blood here, as if the Persians had been slain by some, like, army. And this is surprising, because the Persian army was, like, 10,000 strong. That's a pretty formidable army for the time. Like, who could have invaded them? As Pavlos gets further and further into this land, he discovers a lot of people. And eventually, when Pavlos reaches the edge of the known world, aka the Indus River, he discovers something unprecedented. He sees on the bank of the Indus River a city bigger and more grander than any he's seen in his life. A city that rivals Venice in wealth and Bern in size, so probably the biggest or at least second biggest city ever seen. Located right here, but what he sees in this city is not some like imperial capital that screams wealth like Venice or Bern does, like screams power. He sees a city in absolute flames and chaos, signaling like just anarchy. And when his army moves into the city, they're faced with fierce resistance, but also just like nobody cares because we're kind of all like killing each other essentially. But nonetheless, we see that Pavlos will enter the main palace. It's called the Golden Palace because it's basically just all gold. That's how rich the city is. Now, that's probably not possible. I mean, not like whatever they're called. Like, I don't know what the people that mess with gold are. Alchemy? Like, alchemists maybe? I don't know. I don't know if you can make a full gold palace, but they've made it somehow. But anyway, in this palace, they will find a huge library known as the Karachi Library, because this is the city of Karachi. IRL, the Karachi city is like here, but it's here in this world. And it's a very powerful and just big city, but it's also in a lot of ruins and in flames. And this book will be titled in the native language, and when they go ahead and try and translate it, it will be translated and it will be called The Chronicle of the Indus and Beyond. And the kind of description of this book will be that it entails the history of the lands from the Indus Valley to the Bengali Hills. A book containing the almost complete history of a new world, essentially, the Indian subcontinent. As Pavlos sees the city, and he's basically like, if this city is on the borderland, what is going to be in the heart of this new, like, he's thinking he's down, like, basically a huge new continent that has the same population, maybe even more than Europe, definitely way bigger than Europe. In reality, the population of kind of the Indian subcontinent is actually slightly less than Europe in this timeline. It's actually not as much as it is in real life, but obviously, like, India's quite small. I think it's smaller than Europe. So he got the population size decent. But nonetheless, you know, India is a very feared place to be because of how many people there are in such a small region. And he is right in the idea to kind of retreat from this land, as we see that a lot of soldiers are like, hey, can we go home? I don't want to be here. Like, I'm scared there's going to be a huge ass like army that bigger than any army we've ever seen just come roll us. So we kind of see that Pavlos will kind of leave. However, he will take this book with him, and on his way, he will begin spreading the knowledge of this book all across his empire. He will also go ahead and officially administer the rest of Persia into his empire. And I've just said empire like 1,000 times. And before we get on to the kind of final, like, there's 2 final events, which are kind of like still part of this. Then there's power rankings. But before we do those 3 events, I'm going to say the announcement. And the announcement is that, ladies and gentlemen, there is going to be a sub-spin-off series of Swixo, which will simply be titled Swixo India. It will be a 5-part series which will replace the next 5 episodes, and it will be 5 episodes completely dedicated to the history of India, up from the year like 0, I mean maybe even before the year 0 AV, all the way to the year 412 AV, or I think it's 412 AV by now. 5 parts, 500 years. Hope you are prepared for that. It may be more than 5 parts, but yeah, for the next few episodes, it will be a Swixo India episodes. It's kind of like a mini-series. And eventually, after those 5, maybe more than 5 episodes are done, we will come back to the main Swixo timeline and look at Pavlos and his empire, and obviously the other events which are going to be taking place. But yeah, essentially, book with a lot of the history about, well, I say book, it's probably like the library of multiple books, but main book, which has a history of the Indian subcontinent. And we are going to get 5 more episodes about the history of India before we come back to the main history, if that makes sense. But anyway, this guy has returned home, and he's obviously crowned like the best guy ever. But looking at the religion layer, we can see that Pavlos was a devout green religion guy, and he has spread the green religion far and wide. The red religion does actually have quite a big foothold, like around here, that was spread by Venetian merchants. However, for the most part, the green religion has spread quite a lot, not too much over into Persia. Now, obviously, this green religion is probably like 20 years into the future, but I just kind of wanted to update it now. But there we go, we can see that Pavlos has spread the green religion a lot. In the Anatolian regions, the red religion has been heavily diminished, mainly over to these 2 major cities. That's like literally it. You know what, for like my eye's sake, we're just going to say that the entirety of Mesopotamia is under the green religion. This would probably take like 50 years, but we're just colouring it in now. And we actually see over here that in Egypt, Saladin has actually converted to the green religion to kind of get on the good side of the kind of leader of Izmir, who we all know as Pavlos. I just forgot his name. But this guy is going to do some bit of trickery in the green religion. He's going to be like, we're going to be green religion, but we're kind of going to make our offshoot where basically my royal family, well, not my royal family, the royal family / my family is just kind of like a divine family. So we kind of seen this green offshoot religion kind of exist over here, which is an offshoot of the green religion where basically Saladin and his family / future family are kind of viewed as superior to everyone and basically like gods. Not equal, but God's representation on Earth, essentially. So, cool, I guess. And finally, in the year 413, we see that Pavlos has arrived back over here in the city of Izmir. And we see over here in Izmir that Pavlos will officially be crowned as the Zemperor, which stands for Tsar Emperor, to signal that he is of green religion, and is officially the Zempire of Izmir, or the Izmirian Zempire. And this new title combines all secular and religious power into one. So he's like the Pope in reality, and he's also the Emperor. So that's kind of a bit of a mashup. Obviously, there's no popes because it's the green religion, and it's not like, yeah, blah, blah, blah. And finally, I've never said a lot of finallys. I don't know how long this video is. I'm a bit scared. But we actually have to go over to the religious organization layer, because we see that this is actually kind of changing, as it is no longer Byzantium, which kind of holds this council power. Now, I said at the very start that this was kind of hard to change, but Izmir has changed it. Who's going to stop them, really? They're so strong. And that's the final change for the video. I'm not going to release any power rankings, because frankly, this video is long enough. I don't want to keep it dragging on anymore. 2, I'm kind of running out of time. I was meant to be at a thing like 10 minutes ago, so that's why I'm kind of speeding this up. And 3, I want to like let this settle in before I give out power rankings, because obviously I've been recording for almost 2 hours now, so I'm not really thinking properly, so I don't want to give you inaccurate power rankings. But yeah, I hope you guys enjoyed this video. Sorry if you didn't like this because you think it's unrealistic. If you do want to give criticism, please be kind of nice in the comments. Let me know your thoughts. Obviously, as always, like, don't just like make you up you're happy, but you know, try and communicate it in a nice way. But yeah, hope you enjoyed this video. The Kurdish Empire sucks. Get defeated. Swiss on top. Actually, I don't really like the Swiss Empire. Anyway, hope you guys enjoyed. I am rambling on, and I'll see you in the next video, which won't be Swixo 22. It will be Swixo India Episode 1.